Andor Season 1 was a treat in so many ways, and the one thing that really set it apart from the Kenobi show and the Book of Boba Fett was that it was filmed on location, the budget was well organised, and we got some of the most visually breathtaking Star Wars ever. Well, that's going to continue in the second season, because today we have some massive news. Season 2, which began filming in the UK a couple of months ago, has now moved to Valencia in Spain. Some of the cast and crew have begun shooting scenes in what is a remarkably beautiful part of the country, and according to a couple of sources, they were doing castings out there as well. Now, for a very long time, locals and tourists alike have said that Valencia, especially the Ciudad de las Artes, looks very Star Wars-esque. Now, we know that George Lucas loves Spain. He filmed in Seville for Attack of the Clones. In this case, Andor Season 2 is taking us to Spain, and the scenery is going to look amazing, visually and cinematically diverse. I imagine it's going to be a new planet. We don't really know at this stage. It could be a different part of Naboo. Andor was praised heavily in Season 1 for its beautiful landscapes, because they didn't rely on stagecraft. The volume has its place, but it should only be used scarcely, and they did use it for a couple of scenes, but predominantly Andor Season 1 was on location, same with Season 2. It is believed that shooting in Valencia is temporary, they're only filming a few scenes there, as I say, probably for a new planet. After they're done there, they're going to return to the UK, but there are probably also going to be filming locations we don't know about yet. More information to come, I'll keep you updated as always. And before we move on guys, please be sure to hit that big red subscribe button down below if you've not done so, and also give the notification bell a good old tickle to be alerted every time that I post a new video. And so now guys, a huge change in format to The Mandalorian Season 3. Ludwig Göransson, who composed the first 2 seasons, has not scored the majority of Season 3. Instead, it's Shirley, who worked on the Book of Boba Fett. It's believed that Ludwig did the main theme and a couple of others, so he does have some musical credit in Season 3. But according to filmmusicreporter.com, it's going to predominantly be Shirley. If the music we heard in the Season 3 final trailer was anything to go off, it's gonna sound insane. I have full confidence in both of them. As always, the title theme and the intro are still going to be the classic Ludwig score, but it's going to be a different vibe, as is the Ahsoka show, for which we still don't know who's composing. It could be Ludwig, and if the Ahsoka series, as some of the leaks suggest, are continuing the same themes from Chapter 13, the samurai vibes of Corvus, then Ludwig would be perfect, and the reason I say that is because the score of Chapter 13 is one of the best. One of the most popular themes from that episode was titled Ahsoka Lives. It combined Ahsoka's classic theme by Kevin Kiner with the space western woodwind bass recorder sound of The Mandalorian. And so now guys, we're going to be talking about the Acolyte, because the upcoming dark side-centered show focused on the High Republic also signals great news for the Jedi, because for all fans who miss dark side versus light, or maybe if you're a fan who just wants lightsabers again, this is the show to do that, because according to Leslye Headland, the prequel trilogy is what she's going for in terms of vibe. Even though it's 150 years before the Phantom Menace, Episode 1 heavily inspired the series, and fingers crossed from a certain point of view, the Acolytes might improve live-action Jedi in Disney Plus series, because a lot of fans were disappointed with Kenobi, and apart from flashbacks in The Mandalorian Season 3 and the Book of Boba Fett, we've only seen lone Force users in the form of Luke and Ahsoka, and fans loved it when they used their lightsabers. And I guess you can include Din Djarin using the darksaber as well. Fans love that stuff. Well, the Acolytes could take it to the next level. Ki-Adi-Mundi said that the Sith have been extinct for a millennium, assuming there's nothing going on behind the scenes, so while we may not see any lightsaber duels between Sith and Jedi, at least not to the knowledge of the High Republic Council, we will probably see inner fights, Sith versus Sith. The complacency and arrogance of the Jedi from the High Republic even before, all the way up to the Phantom Menace, led them to assume there were no Sith, but they were there, hiding in the shadows, and that's what the Acolyte is going to deal with, the Sith plan, what they're up to behind the scenes. The Jedi probably don't know about it, and they might not even face them in the Acolyte, or if they do, it's going to be wiped from the record, and that's why the Council by the time of the Phantom Menace, 100 years later, is not aware of it. But either way, this dichotomy is going to be so interesting. Jedi and Sith, grapples with the dark side and the light. And if we do see Jedi versus Sith, then maybe it's Jedi who never live to tell the tale. They die in their duel, and to the Council, it's mysterious circumstances. And despite some skepticism, apathy and hesitation from some fans, maybe this is me being too positive, but I do believe the Acolyte has great potential, and who knows, it might be another Andor, a show that many people slept on but blew us away when it dropped. Now, the reason I'm so excited about the Acolyte in terms of Jedi is that the show takes place during their height, in other words, the final days of the High Republic, 100 to 50 years before Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. The Galactic Republic is thriving, and we're gonna see the Jedi in their golden white robes on the highest levels of Coruscant, contrasted with the Sith, who are in hiding at this time, working on their ultimate plan, a Dark Lord who takes a former Padawan under his wing and trains her in the dark side. And in this contrast, ironically, we might start to feel sympathy for the Sith Acolyte. There's a reason she left the Jedi, and at this time, the Jedi were arrogant, they were at the height of their powers and influence. No Star Wars movie or show, live action or animated, has explored this era yet. It's only in the books and comics, so there is a huge pressure on Leslye Headland to deliver with the Acolyte, to show us an accurate depiction of the Jedi during this time, and for those who've read the High Republic books, there's even more pressure to do that time period justice. So far, the furthest back Star Wars has gone in terms of Jedi in a TV show was Count Dooku's first episode of Tales of the Jedi. Star Wars fans are enthralled with what came before, and even though many, myself included, would have preferred an Old Republic series, I'm not going to write off this show just yet. The Acolyte needs to convince us the High Republic is worth being invested in, because more people watch the shows and movies than read the books. For most fans, this is going to be their first introduction to the High Republic, so they need to do it well is what I'm saying. And funnily enough, during this time period, there are a few familiar Jedi. Yoda in particular would already be Grand Master, and his own faulty decision-making in the prequels, often clouded by arrogance, and sure, Palpatine messed with their minds a bit, but the eventual fall of the Jedi in Order 66, due to bad decision-making, could be on full display this early on. I really do hope Yoda appears, Yaddle too. And we need to read between the lines with this show. This is just the beginning of a larger Lucasfilm effort to push the High Republic. We're probably going to see it much more, so if the Acolyte delivers, there's no problem, but in the eyes of the fandom at large, Force users are the bread and butter of this franchise. Shows like Andor demonstrate it doesn't need to be, but for your average Disney Plus subscriber who's a Star Wars fan, those classic George Lucas tropes matter most above all. And when Leslye Headland said she was inspired by the Phantom Menace, I think it's the secretive side of the Sith being concealed until the time they reveal themselves. We might not get much Sith versus Jedi, not in the sense of an all-out battle, but maybe in flashbacks and the theme of the struggle between light and dark, a struggle the Padawan aura is going to face. And remember guys, Bespin Bulletin did report on a rumour that we are going to see some classic Sith Lords like Bane, Nihilus and so on in flashbacks, or maybe a holocron, so there is going to be some lightsaber action, and maybe even from the Jedi side. According to some of the early leaks, the Sith Acolyte takes on her old Jedi Padawan friend, so lots to look forward to. But with that said, my dear friends, share your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always. Okay, so I'm going to be reacting to this video by Kabara, and I think they've made 2 of these now, and it's basically The Mandalorian as a 60s movie. I first came across this, the Mid-Journey AI type of things, with Family Guy as an 80s thing. Well, now this is The Mandalorian, and I've got to say, I'm a fan. I think some of this is really cool. So let's dive into it. So the first one is Din Djarin. The background aesthetic is very 60s. Then we have the 60s version of the Razor Crest. We got the landscape here of Tatooine. Okay, so I'm just going to pause here. We have Ahsoka. This is eerily spot on with what you'd expect for like a 60s sci-fi. And you know, Star Wars in 1977 revolutionized so much in the industry, and of course in space opera, space fantasy, sci-fi. I guess this is what Togrutas may have looked like if the idea had been made in the 60s. Here we have Luke. Pretty standard. Boba Fett, very action figure-like. Quite a lot of exposure on the helmet. Then we get into some of the uncanny territory with this Jawa. Again, the Razor Crest, that kind of Western vibe desert in the background. That's very 60s. Kind of like Django, the Magnificent Seven vibe. Maybe a bit of True Grit. Minus the spaceship, of course. Now, obviously in the 60s, they wouldn't have had the technology to do a Grogu puppet like today, but this Grogu is terrifying. This one's even worse. I'm so glad we have the Grogu we have today. Okay, so this, I think, is the one frame that gets it spot on. If you were to say Bo-Katan, but made in the 60s in a sci-fi, and you have a similar hairstyle, similar overall style, but you have to make it kind of 60s, this is the look. It's very like Star Trek-y. I don't know what it is about it, but it screams 1960s, maybe early 70s sci-fi. Really good job, by the way. Then we have Cara Dune, Pedro Pascal, This screams Western. His aesthetic, the shadow on his face, the serious look, the side glance. Then we have Boba Fett again. Awesome. I really enjoyed that. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.